To call to order the regular meeting of the November 10th, 2021 Fitchburg Conservation Commission. The Conservation Commission has 7 members. Members are citizens residing in Fitchburg, Massachusetts. The commission is appointed by the City Council and serves on a volunteer basis. The commission collaborates with the residents, businesses, and organizations to facilitate compliance with the 8 interests of the Wetlands Protection Act and the Fitchburg Wetlands Bylaw. Meetings of this commission are subject to and abide by the open meeting law. If you would like more information about any of these regulations, please ask a commissioner, our agent, or the environmental consultant. Thank you for your commitment to the conservation of our natural resources. Also, thank you for your patience as we navigate this hybrid meeting. The commission requests that folks wishing to speak approach the podium, speak clearly into the microphone, and remote attendees maintain microphones on mute. For your own privacy, if you would like to speak, you can use the chat function or raise your hand to alert the chair that you intend to speak. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to come in tonight, and we'll get to hear all your concerns. Just take it nice and slow, and remember that we are in a hybrid meeting, so there's all kinds of other stuff going on. Try and navigate it. So the first thing I want to do is call the roll. Commissioner Bro.
Good evening, everybody. I'm here.
Commissioner Baker.
Here.
Commissioner Christian.
Here.
Commissioner Donnelly.
Yeah.
Commissioner Helene.
Here.
Commissioner Satterfield here. Okay. We don't have any minutes to approve at this time. So first of all, we're going under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 13, Section 40. The Fitchburg Conservation Commission will open the hearing for notice of intent. Barclay Enterprises, LLC, Sheldon Road, lots 9 and 10. New single-family dwellings in the buffer zone. Hold on, I gotta make this bigger, okay? I have to make my font bigger or take my glasses off. Okay. Is Mr. Paul, we've got Paul, I don't want to butcher his last name, it starts with a G. Grazowitz. He is
Yes.
joining us via remote. Okay. He's got his, oh, there we go. Good evening, Mr. Grazowitz.
Good evening. How are you today?
Okay.
We're good.
Okay, so thank you for joining us. Is our environmental consultant, is Tim out there too?
I am, Tracy. Good evening.
Welcome, Mr. Smith. Okay, so we've got some updates for the, it's been a while since we've all spoken. So who wants to go first? Mike?
Well, commission members and for the public who's here, we sent the notice of intent and the revised plan out to Tim Smith, the commission's consultant, and we have a, I'll try to call it up on the screen now, comments from Tim. And Tim, do you want to just kind of summarize while I put up on the screen here?
Sure. So I did a review of the 2 lots. I'm in agreement with the wetland delineation. One thing that I found when walking the site is there was a violation in that you can see excavation, you can see tracks from either an excavator or backhoe that went through the wetland and to an area where it appears that they did the test hole. So in order to test for the whether the soils are adequate for subsurface sewer system, they brought in again, an excavator or a backhoe, drove it through the wetlands, and then did the excavation for the soil sampling. This is actually, I've seen this through the years, this happens. It's a minor violation, but it is a violation. Soils in the wetlands are, as you know, soils and wetlands are typically very rich in organics, and the soils get compressed, and we get rutting in the wetlands. So even though it is a minor violation, it certainly is a violation. And under the Wetlands Protection Act, if you alter wetlands without a valid order of conditions, you have to restore the wetlands to the original condition before the violation occurred. So that's one of the things comments I made, that the altered wetlands have to be restored, and the restoration work has to be overseen by a wetland scientist, monitored by a wetland scientist, and then the wetland scientist needs to provide a report to the commission with photo documentation demonstrating that the restoration effort was successful. So that was one of the issues. One of the concerns that the commission always has is that the work stay out of the no-build zone and the no alteration zone, and in this case they are compliant with those requirements. This project, by the way, it's a buffer zone project. There's no work proposed in a wetland resource area. It's all within the 100-foot buffer zone. Because they are in a 100-foot buffer zone, the commission has jurisdiction over the project. But they are allowed to work within the 100-foot, or build a home within the 100-foot buffer zone if they meet all the performance standards, which the project does. Again, we have that violation that needs to be corrected. And one of the other elements that I'm asking for is that if they really should be correcting the violation before they even start building the house. It gives the commission some leverage to make sure that the restoration is completed. All too often what happens is I've seen it again and again where if the commission doesn't make it a requirement, the restoration a requirement before a building permit is issued, the developer goes in, does their project, makes their money, and then never be seen again. So we want to make sure that restoration is done. And again, it's not we're not talking about a significant restoration effort, so it should be something that they can do. That's a summary of my comments. There was one more thing, is they basically proposed to have silt fencing all around the area of alteration. And we see this very commonly where, quite frankly, a lot of times projects get developed from the desk, and they're covering their bases by putting silt fence everywhere. In some cases, you don't need silt fence, right? Water flows downhill. So if the wetland is upgraded, you don't need to have the silt fence. So why install the silt fence, which can be a barrier to reptiles and amphibians? So if you can eliminate silt fence, I think you should. In other cases, a silt fence may be totally inadequate. I've seen again and again where developer starts developing and get the bulldozer in, and it pushes dirt right up against the erosion controls. And if the erosion controls aren't sturdy enough, they just get blown over or pushed over. So in some instances, we may want to go further than the silt fence. And one of the ways we could address the issue is to actually before the silt fence gets installed, have either the conservation agent or myself or one of the commissioners go out and make a determination where the silt fencing needs to go, and where additional erosion controls such as hay bales and or silt wattle needs to be installed. So those are the recommendations, and does anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr.
Welcome.
Grasowitz, do you have any comments?
No, that sounds fine. I just would like to clarify that I have no problem with repairing that wetlands. What actually happened there was, this was logged by the previous owner, and when we were out there in December, there was a pretty good snow cover on the ground, so I believe the excavator operator just followed what he saw was, an access from before without realizing what was under the snow. And, I don't know if it got any worse or not, but we'll certainly have no problem taking care of the repairs to the, to those two areas.
So, Mr. Grasowitz, how do you intend to, how is your intention of restoring the violation? It's one thing to tell us you're going to do it, but can you tell us how you're going to do it and when you're going to do it, what your timeline is?
Yeah, basically, we can do it, as suggested before, starting the building. And one of the areas, the area that's, it's actually just below or south of flags B3 and B4. It's an area of, it's before the actual intermittent stream starts, but it's low there. And it looks like they put a bunch of, they put gravel or stone in there to, to firm it up. And then, after they did their logging or whatever, they just left it that way. They also left several jugs of hydraulic oil. In fact, a couple of them were full. But, so that area is going to be, removing the stone and, getting some, there's probably some good organics underneath the stone. And the second area that they would have crossed, which is just to the right of the lot line, wet flags E8, that area right there. It's very, it's just going to take basically clearing up some ruts and making sure that there's no high spots left. It's very marginally wet. So that one, there was no extra material put there, but I'm sure there's some little bit rutting and maybe, in fact, the ground wasn't even soft there. It's very hard. So that'll be easy to just fix the tracks that went through there. But yeah, we'll have a professional wetland scientist or a certified wetland scientist monitor that work and report on it when it's complete.
Okay. Tracy, do you want to take each one separately then? We're on 9 now.
Okay. So were the violations, Mr. Smith, were the violations on 9 or 10, or were they on both? Do you recall?
Both.
Okay. So, Michael, do we have in order to send out a violation notice, are we going to be sending it to, we have to designate whether it's 9 or 10?
Well, there's a separate separate notice of intent filed for each lot, 9 and 10, with the special conditions that Tim had suggested for each. Doesn't that kind of address the issue? Because he says prior to the issuance of the building permit, the problem's got to be fixed, and restoration overseen and monitored by a professional wetland scientist, et cetera, et cetera. So I mean, we have a way where we can do this, can I? We have a way where we can tag that particular lot in the city's permitting system so that, building department is aware that there needs to be an inspection of that site and that it's certified as being clean prior to the building permit being issued.
I guess at this point, I'm going to turn to my commissioners and ask if you want to file a notice of if you want there to be a violation notice for the violations that Mr. Smith identified when he was on site. Or if we can either have a violation notice sent out, or we can not have a violation notice sent out. Either way, it's going to get resolved in the orders of condition.
I would move that we put it in the order of condition, that they have to, take care of the ruts. And I think that would really solve the problem. And they seem like they are aware of it. And let's make sure that we get it taken care of as soon as possible.
Any other commissioners?
The violation was identified as minor. I think importantly, the building department, the communication by us to them to withhold a building permit has to be paramount, and that would be sufficient in lieu of a violation notice. But the building department won't do that without communication, right? And then, and I would only ask, I'm inclined to approve the applicant based on Tim, our agent's submission, and add number 3, at least for the first owner, a demarcation, wetland demarcation with pressure-treated 4x4 posts and markers, simply because at a later date there will be a plea of ignorance of filling wetlands, because that's what new homeowners do. So I think that would be number 3 on Tim's recommendation. If he didn't include it, I'd like to. And then let the building department know that not to issue a building permit until we sign off. And that ought to take care of any violation notice identified as minor.
I'll second Mary's motion.
Okay.
One point, Michael, to clarify, did you mean like demarcate with posts with those little?
I do.
Okay.
They're tiptoeing in the buffer zone 100%. Therefore, their yard will likely expand into a wetland over time, and we'll just take care of the first owner, if not beyond. Yeah. Yes.
Hey, Mike, so I have the language all written up. I actually was on the fence about adding that language. They're really closest to the driveway is actually very close to the wetland. And, but typically where we see the violations after the fact is when the house is close to the wetland, because usually it's the deck that they're putting right adjacent or over the wetlands. It's the shed, it's the swing set. It's the property right around the house where they need more space and tend to expand, and that expansion goes into the wetland resource area. Not so much the driveway, but I would, so I definitely get your point, and I can provide that language, that condition, because it's all set up on my computer and ready to go.
Okay. And so for maybe some of the new members of the commission, several years ago, the commission had a bunch of little plates drawn up and say, basically for wetland delineation boundary. So you just stick that on the post, I think. And Paul, I'll gladly give, you're not going to be the builder, but hook me up with who the builder is going to be, and we can see that those badges can be affixed to the post and installed, like we're discussing.
So if this is going to be in the orders of condition, do we expect a restoration plan as part of the orders of condition? I'm just wondering when we get the plan. If we don't ask for it, we're not ever going to get it.
Could we ask Tim whether he has that built into his order of conditions?
So I did not recommend the submission of a plan. Again, it's a fairly minor violation, and rather than having the applicant come back with a plan, what I recommended is that the violation be dealt with, and that would prolong the time when the restoration was completed. And we're losing, we're going to be into a deep freeze very shortly. So what I proposed is that the restoration be overseen by a wetland scientist. So rather than doing a plan, because again, it's pretty straightforward what they need to do. And then, but the wetland scientist would prepare a written report with photo documentation and send it to the commission. If the commission didn't find it acceptable, then the commission doesn't have to approve it, and then the builder doesn't get a building permit. So there is leverage to make sure that the wetland restoration is done in accordance with the commission's approval.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. So, let's see. Is there anyone here from the public who is here to discuss this hearing? I think most of our members here are here for another issue, but is there anyone here who'd like to talk about Sheldon Road, lots 9 and 10? Okay. We have a motion on the table. Can you identify if that motion was for lot 9 or lot 10?
The violation is on which lot?
Both. No, we have a motion on the table to, I think, approve this with the...
So the motion that I had is to approve for 9 and 10 with Tim's order of conditions, along with Mike Donnelly's order of condition, that we delineate the wetland, and that prior to any building approval, they need to fix the violation, the ruts, which seems like that's, the minor violation, and get it approved by a wetland scientist.
Mike, is that okay?
Is that cohesive?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's also have the pre-construction hearing with the agent.
That's in the boilerplate anyway.
Okay. The contractor, the heavy equipment operator, so we can identify where everything's allowed to go and what they're allowed to do before they get started. Okay.
Madam Chair, before we move on to voting on that,
Yes.
I have a question for Paul. I can't find any place on your maps where the locations of test pits 9A and B, or test pits 10A, B, C, or D are located.
Yeah, what I did on this plan was, there were so many lines on it, I turned several of the layers off, but I mean, I have, I could share my screen and you could see where those are if you want.
Yeah, I would like to know.
Okay.
We can only see what you provide us.
Thank you,
Right.
Daniel. I think he got it.
Okay, let's see. Share screen.
Oh, I think that's still mine. Yep, that's mine still.
See that?
Just a second, we're
Oh.
working through the
And you have to
technology.
stop mine in order for Paul to be able to start his. Now you go, Paul.
How's that?
Almost there.
That working now?
It says you have started screen sharing, but I don't see. Okay, that's still mine.
See, maybe a little awkward trying to troubleshoot or trying to figure out how exactly to get through this. It's like, obviously, Mr. Grasowitz has started screen sharing. I just can't figure out exactly. Let's see. I guess you can
Madam
try.
Chair, as an alternative, we could just put this off till next meeting, and he could provide the proper information to us before then, and we can move on.
Or if you have a thing to send to Mr. O'Hara, perhaps he could be able to pull it up.
Yeah, I don't know why this isn't working. Let's see.
Ralph, it wasn't included in the soil logs itself. That was a locations were
I
missing.
looked at all the materials you provided in the,
Well, actually, we're getting something on the screen now.
yeah, but it's not on that.
This isn't yours, right? Or no? I believe we are actually seeing something now.
It'd be black with some magentas, all kinds of colors on it.
We just have a black and white one, it looks like.
No.
Yeah, but I'm looking for where the soil
soil
test pits
test
are.
was.
They're not shown.
Yeah,
He's got his wetland flags, but
right.
no locations of test pits on this one or the one for the other lot.
Good
I
spot.
can't really evaluate it.
Paul, we're seeing your plan, but not where the test pits are.
Yeah, is it just black and white or is it colored?
No, black and
It's
white.
just black and white, it looks like.
Yeah, then it's, yeah, I'm trying to share the CAD drawing here. I'm gonna say new share. I'm not sure what that's gonna do. Let's see.
Yeah, I think you're sharing the wrong window at the moment. I think you're sharing what you've got in Adobe right now, as opposed to, yep, that looks
There we
better.
go.
The black background
Yep. And number 9 is to the left.
and yeah, so that your soil testing is down here, test pit perk, test pit for lot 9, and then over on lot 10, we've got test pit, perk, test pit, test pit, test pit, perk on lot 10 here. These symbols.
Yeah, Paul, now that you've pointed out what the symbol, I can see the symbols on the black and white, but there's no test pit numbers, so I didn't know what they were.
Yeah, on the, yeah, like I said, I just turned some of these layers off because it was a little bit overwhelming. But, yeah,
Okay, maybe that's sufficient.
Are those in appropriate locations?
Yeah, I mean, they're in the locations
Or they should,
that would be relevant. I just didn't know, I had no idea where they were.
okay.
Now I see where they are. I don't know which one is which, but since they're similar, it
this
doesn't.
one is,
doesn't matter.
I just thought a bunch of layers, and we got 9, let's see, TP 8/9A. All right, that's on the NOI plan, the test pit logs are over on the right-hand side of the drawing, so that's, and the other one is test pit 9B on 9. And over on 10, we've got 10A, 10B, 10C in the reserve area, and 10D.
Okay, thank you. They're in relevant locations.
Yep.
Can we move forward with the vote, Dr. Baker? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Mary made the motion. There was a second? I don't know.
Yes,
It's been a
Ralph
while.
seconded.
Okay.
But this is for both 9 and 10.
Yep.
All in favor? Oh, here, wait, let me call the roll. Commissioner Bro?
Hi, guys. Yeah, I agree with Tim's analysis for the order too, and I think it's arrived us at a good direction for this point forward for these lots to be ready. I also like to second the importance of Mike's idea, though, to coordinate with the city's building department, maybe to help hold the release of the permit until we have a certified wetland remediation plan. But I think that goes in line with what all you guys had said, so aye.
Commissioner Baker?
Aye.
Commissioner Christian?
Aye.
Commissioner Donnelly?
Aye. Aye.
Commissioner Helene?
Aye.
The chair says aye. All in favor, so the motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Grazowitz.
All right, thank you all very much.
Right. Good night,
Thank
Paul.
you.
Have a good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, for the work you put into this, too. Okay.
While we're on that, by the way, at your leisure, we have 6 people here now. Okay, 5, but that's enough to sign. The tab with the sticky is the signature page. Or we can set them aside and sign them later. I just don't want you guys to escape
No,
tonight
this is
without...
totally fine. We got,
Okay.
is that,
Do we
that's
need
it?
to sign this?
Just those
Okay.
two.
I guess so. Probably with these. Do you need a pen?
I do. Thank you. There you go. Thanks so much.
Thank you. All right. So, moving forward, as a point of order, I'm not going to open the hearing for, I don't think I need to open the hearing, do I?
Well, I
To
think
hear
it's-
from the abutters, or should I open the hearing?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
you should. Could I explain?
Yeah, go
just a
ahead.
bit? Just because it just might be easier. Since folks were here last month for this, we've received a comment letter from Tim Smith, which will show on the screen and we'll be discussing. There was not rebuttals, but reactions to that comment letter by Mr. Smith. And then Mr. Smith had some additional follow-up questions of GPR, the engineer for the applicant Leclerc here. The engineer from GPR who was present in person at the last meeting and throughout this whole process is expecting or has already seen the arrival of their first child. So he will not be here tonight. So they requested a continuance, but I had advised them that we'll have a fair amount of folks here, whether in person or participating remotely, and there's been other information. So I think it's fair to open up the hearing, take that additional information in. If there's any additional comment from the neighbors, whether in person or remotely, let's hear that and continue till the December meeting, when hopefully the engineer will be able to attend. And I'll ask Dan to share my screen so we can go back to the plan and everybody can see.
Okay, so under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 13, Section 40, the Fitchburg Conservation Commission will open the hearing for notice of intent Leclerc, proposed single-family dwelling, 0 Ashby State Road. Okay. So, Mike, do you want to start with the updates?
Yeah.
How do we want to start with this?
So this was Tim's comments. Let me blow it up a bit here. Actually, this, you know what, to cut to the chase, which would be quicker, let's move to the next item, which is, okay. It's GPR and commenting in red on the review comments that Mr. Smith had. So the first couple, yep, they agree.
Mr. Smith, you can feel free to include yourself in this discussion.
Sure. Okay, so let's start with item number 3. So one of the issues that I had was, if you look at the site plan, they show the 100-year floodplain, or the bordering land subject to flooding. But the line kind of peters out. It's difficult to see if for example, that the large culvert is in the floodplain or not. And so I just simply asked the question: Is it in the floodplain? And I've went and I looked at the floodplain maps, and it appears that it is in the floodplain. And when I've asked, is it in the floodplain, the answer I get back is, well, it's not filling the floodplain. And that's not the question I'm asking. I'm asking, is there alteration? I understand. So when we look at floodplain from a regulatory standpoint, from the Wetlands Protection Act standpoint, we're looking at really 2 issues. One we're looking at if there's a performance standard that says if you fill in floodplain, that means that area, right? It's going if flooding occurs, the flooding, and you filled in the floodplain, the flooding is going to occur somewhere else, right? So, so what the law says is you have to mitigate that by providing compensatory flood storage. So basically, if you fill in floodplain, you've got to dig a hole somewhere else, and that hole, or the excavated area, needs to be the same elevation as the floodplain that was lost. So the idea is no net loss in flood storage capacity. So that's and that's when he said, when I asked, are you altering? That's what he was getting at by saying, well, yeah, but we're not filling. But floodplain serves another purpose. Floodplain's important for wildlife habitat. So it's important to know if they're altering the floodplain. So maybe they're not filling in the floodplain, but perhaps they're putting a driveway or taking trees down. And that's relevant, again, because the act assumes that floodplain is important for wildlife. So we had a little bit of a difference of opinion there, and I'm asking for clarification. And again, so he wrote, there is no floodplain filling intended in red. You can see that, and I've asked for him to clarify that. I want to know where it's altered, not just filled. So that's that item. Moving on to the next item. So because they are clearly there, so the performance standards for filling in bordering vegetated wetlands is very similar. What the act says is you can, in certain circumstances, you can fill up to 5,000 square feet of bordering vegetated wetland. However, if you do that, you have to replicate the wetland. And there's all sorts of performance standards around that replication. And so one of the performance standard is if you replicate, if you're going to replicate the wetlands, you have to replicate at roughly at the same elevation that you did the alteration. And in this instance, the applicant did not provide any elevations. So how does the Conservation Commission know that that performance standard is met? They don't know. So they can't. The commission can't find that performance standard has been met. So that's the issue that I raised. And the applicant talked about a number of the other questions I asked, but really did not provide elevation. So I'm still not satisfied that question or that issue has been satisfied. Next was the lifespan of the Contech culvert. So this culvert is huge. I think it was like, the culvert's going to span something like 34 feet, and it's, I think if I'm correct, it's like 18 feet wide. It's a very large structure. And I think what no one wants to see is for the applicant to install this large aluminum box culvert, and then 20 years from now, the box culvert is caving in, falling into the wetlands, and then the homeowner, it's going to be extremely expensive to install this box culvert, and you wouldn't want to see a situation where here we are, the homeowner 20 years from now can't afford to rebuild this box culvert, and it caves in. So one of the things I've asked is, what's the lifespan of this box culvert? And the response I got was that it's expected to be 75 or 100 years. Before it needs to be replaced. I also asked, does it need to be, is there any maintenance required? So, okay, it can last 100 years, but does it need to be painted every 10 years with some special coating? Even galvanized material will rust over time, and we know that this even if the commission were to say, hey, you can't use salt in the driveway, it's hard. How do you enforce, or how do you police the homeowner from using salt in the driveway? And salt is very corrosive to any kind of metal. So, and you've got, by definition, right, it's spanning a wetland. So that galvanized steel or whatever the material is, aluminum, is going to be subject to perhaps salt and definitely water and moisture. And does it need to be maintained in some way? And then who's responsible for the maintenance, and how does the commission enforce the maintenance? I've seen over the years where it could be a difficult thing where you propose it, you approve it, but then the maintenance doesn't occur down the line. So that's still an open issue. When they're installing this culvert, they have to install concrete footings for the culvert to sit on, and those footings are going to be adjacent to the wetlands. So when they start excavating for the footings, those footings, the excavated area, it's going to fill up with water. And they can't, in the sides of the excavation are likely to start caving in, and it's going to get really messy. And so typically what's done in construction is they do what's called dewatering. simply they pump the water out of the excavated area. So they're pumping this water, and the water that they pump out is going to be laden with, it's going to be mucky water, right? It's going to be laden with silt. And so there are best management practices for how you handle that dewatering. So typically, for example, you might form a corral or a box with hay bales, and then put some type of silt fabric, geotextile fabric, over the box of hay bales, and you might discharge into that box. And you might even they have like they call it a silt sock, where they put the silt sock over the discharge pipe, so that the silt sock, the geotextile fabric, and the hay bales capture any silt, so only clean water filters out of that area and back into the wetland, and into which eventually goes into the Falula Brook and Baker Brook. So, and it's very common to have a typical detail showing this best management practice. They didn't provide anything. I'm asking them to provide something, and they've said, well, that's really up to the contractor. And I feel like it's something that we shouldn't leave up to the contractor. They should be able to provide a BMP up front and provide it for the Conservation Commission's approval. The next one, I think, is probably the most significant issue that I found, is they're proposing a 290-foot long driveway. I believe it's 10 or 12 feet wide and 2 foot shoulders, but between the driveway and the rooftop, that's a lot of impervious area that you're adding to this area. And we know, we talked to the neighbors, we went out and we looked at the neighbors' yards. There's a high groundwater table in that area. There's clearly a high groundwater table, and we know all of the water from that site flows into into the wetland, and flows into Falula Brook, and then it flows into Baker Brook. And we know that for years, every year we have flooding on John Fitch Highway. And when we have that flooding, people can't shop, the shops lose money, the city sends out trucks to try and, if there's something damming Baker Brook, or if there's catch basins that get filled up with trash, it's an expense that the city and the shop owners bear every year because of that flooding. And this project is going to, it's going to exacerbate it. And yes, it's only one project, but if the commission allows this throughout the city, it's going to be an even worse problem. So they need to deal with the water coming off the site. And in the last probably 10 to 20 years, really one of the main focuses of the DEP is to prevent water from going off of a site and causing flooding, but having that water flow, recharging the groundwater table. So the soils act as a filter. So when you recharge the water into the groundwater table, the water infiltrates through the soils, and those soils filter and clean the water. So not only are you reducing flooding, but you're also cleaning the water by recharging into the groundwater table, as opposed to putting the water in a stream where it's going to end up causing flooding. So in terms of the regulatory issue with regard to this, so it's part of the stormwater standards that requires that the stormwater runoff from a site be equal or less than, or let me see if I can say this correctly, the pre-development rate or the post-development rate of stormwater runoff be equal or less than the pre-development rate of stormwater runoff. In other words, you don't cause more runoff on the site. And they're clearly doing that, because we've got 290 feet long paved driveway. So they're adding a lot of surface water runoff. So there's stormwater standards under the Wetlands Protection Act has these stormwater standards, However, there's an exemption in the stormwater standards, and it says that the exemption is stormwater standards do not apply to a single-family home. So they're citing that exemption, saying we don't have to do anything with the stormwater off the site because it's just a single-family home and we comply with, and there's an exemption. Well, not only do they have to comply with the Wetlands Protection Act, but they also have to comply with the City of Fitchburg's Wetlands Protection Ordinance. And under the local ordinance, it says that any project that's subject to the ordinance has to meet the standards. So in effect, the local ordinance eliminates the exemption for single-family homes. So I'm asking that they comply with the local ordinance. I agree they are exempt from the state act, but they're not exempt from the local ordinance. And the local ordinance says that they have to meet the stormwater standards, which means they have to do something with all the runoff coming off that site because of this long driveway and all the other impervious area that they're adding.
Tim?
Next one, Mike? Yes.
I would conclude from that, since the discharge from all that runoff is going to be entering an area where the water table is very shallow, that there's not any capacity for the sort of infiltration that you just talked about that would potentially filter and clean that stormwater runoff. So that's an important consideration that I think we should bear in mind. In other words, as soon as the stormwater flows down those swales and enters the wetland, it's entering an area with shallow water table, basically inundated, and there's not any room for infiltration. There's only going to be further runoff.
Yes, I understand what you're saying, and so typically the way this works, right, is we say, hey, you need to do something with the stormwater, and they propose some type of way to recharge the water into the groundwater table, and then we respond by saying, do some soil tests that show us, to your point, that show us that you've got the soils are suitable to infiltrate the water back into the groundwater table. So I guess I agree with you. I just saw that as something that comes later. Maybe there's some place on that site where the soils are suitable. I don't know. I guess I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. But I agree with you.
Tim, did you talk about the runoff of the driveway at all, like as far as tar and all that goes, or did you not address that? Is that a concern at all?
No, that's exactly what I'm talking about, is the runoff from that driveway. It's going to be significant, and they need to figure out a way to handle it. And
meant like just the water itself, like the quantity of the water, or the chemicals that will now be in the water from the tar and the pavement. Are they planning on paving?
they are proposing to pave the driveway. Next, I commented on the, so if you look at the site plans, when they install the driveway, there's going to be significant slopes, side slopes to the driveway, and I'm asking, show us how you're going to stabilize those slopes. They proposed a swale down. Basically, the swale runs parallel to the driveway to pick up some of the water, and they have check dams. But based on the grades, it appears that the check dams that they have are inadequate. They propose to add more check dams. So what the check dams are, really, check dams are just like riprap or rock, small rock dams, and it slows down the velocity of the water. So it's the velocity of the water that causes scouring, right? So if you can slow the water down, it'll cause less erosion. It also gives the water more time to infiltrate the ground. So the check dams are a good idea. It's just, they need to do more of them, and they've agreed, and they're going to revise the plan to show additional check dams. Next is a discrepancy. There was an issue about whether or not the project is a limited project. So there's a project can have a limited project status, and if they claim limited project status, then they don't need to meet all the performance standards. What they do need to do is meet the performance standards to the extent possible, right? So don't need to, it's not a, you have to meet an absolute have to meet the standards. It's you need to meet the extent possible. They had in their notice of intent that it wasn't a limited project. But then in the simplified wildlife analysis, it referenced that it was a limited project. So I asked for clarification, and they said, no. We're saying it's not. We just said it's limited access, but it's not a limited. We're not claiming limited project status. So that really resolved that issue. So they do need to meet all the performance standards. I think that was it.
Thank you,
that's
Mr. Smith.
Summary of the issues. Yeah, you're welcome, Tracy.
Okay, so we've got that update. Now we have some abutters here to speak, and welcome. Go ahead if you'd like to come up to the podium. We'll need you to state your name and address for the record, and then go ahead and speak clearly. We're happy to have you here.
Foster, 115 Ashby State Road. I feel like we're family. I'm meeting so often. Just one thing Tim mentioned, I did appreciate his report. It was quite thorough. But one thing he did mention was the additional dams, or water dams that were needed. And I think, again, ask ourselves why are all those dams needed? Because there's a lot of water coming off that banking. And I'm the one that's going to be the recipient of all this water. It's going to back up on my property. I think I showed you the level of that pipe that the water is draining out. Any more water coming in is going to cover the pipe, and I'm flooded. There's nothing I can do. So I guess I ask you to consider that. Also, he mentioned something on the plans in the Sheldon Road area about the gentleman building a house and having a certain area that people put a swing set up, people put a pool. If Mr. Leclerc sells this land, and he sells the 1.7 acres, who's going to monitor what the new owner does on this land? It's his land. Who's going to monitor what he does? He's going to want to do things. I can understand that. But he wants to put a pool in. Who's going to monitor him putting the pool in? If he wants to put in some kind of fencing area, dig into the ground, who's going to monitor that? So those are the things you have to consider when somebody moves in and becomes a resident of the area. So I just ask you to consider those things as well. And the last thing I'll mention, you mentioned the driveway. In the wintertime, when somebody puts salt and the other nonsense, the chemicals they put down, all that's going into the wetlands. And that's going to destroy the wetlands as well. So, any questions that you want to ask me? Or any questions you want to ask me?
I think commissioners, anyone have questions for Mr. Foster?
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
All right. I don't mean to keep speaking, but I've got a lot of money in this property, and I've done a lot of work to keep the water away, and it seems like worrying about Mr. Leclerc and his hardship. I mean, he spent more money with this piece of property, and nobody seems to be worrying about the landowners around it. And we're the ones that are going to inherit the hardship that he's talking about. So.
Thank you, Mr. Foster. Who wants to go next? Is everyone else here for, oh, go ahead. Yeah, here we go.
I'm Christine Fagoni. I'm at 162 Fisher Road. I'm also in a butter. Just like Russ had mentioned, I don't think we mentioned it last time, so I just wanted to bring it up. He went in front of the zoning board as well, and one of the things that he petitioned against was that he was having a hardship, and that's why he was requesting a variance to access the property through the Fisher Road access. It sounds like this project's going to cost quite a bit of money, so I don't know how he can go from a hardship to investing a lot of money into a project like this. So I just wanted to make sure that you are aware of that. He also, when he first started the project, was intending to place 2 homes on the total land that he purchased. So my concern would be that he comes in and he's able to place 1 home, and then what's going to stop him from building a second home on the other portion of the land? So I just wanted to note that.
Thank you, Mrs. Pagoni. It's nice to see you again. Is anyone else here to talk about the hearing for Leclerc? Okay, can I, Mike, do you have anything else? Do we have any commissioners that have anything?
I do.
Go ahead, Ralph.
When we had the site walk, we visited the proposed location for the house that Mr. Leclerc is proposing. And as anyone who was there with us knows, that area looks like it was excavated at some time. Maybe it was a borrow pit or something. And there was standing water in the area where the house would be, just up there on the display. The wetlands person said that it didn't qualify as he didn't delineate it. But I have the question whether, in fact, it's functionally a wetland. And I think to determine that, we should consider requiring that the proponent perform groundwater monitoring over several seasons to determine whether it is functionally a wetland. And I raised this with Tim, and he thought it was an excellent point. I don't know, did you give it any further thought, Tim?
Yeah, Ralph, I agree with you. When we were there, we actually asked the wetland scientist, the project proponent's wetland scientist, did you look at this? How come you didn't delineate this? And his response was, I don't think I saw it. So he really didn't look at it. We asked him to look at the soils because, again, there was, as Ralph says, there was standing water. So when you identify wetlands, right, there's 3 things you're looking at. You're looking at the soils, the hydrology, and the botany. And if there's standing water, that's part of the hydrology, right? So the wetland scientists did look at the soils, and we did not see hydric soils, wetland soils. However, having said that, those soils take time to change, right? Because over time, the groundwater table goes, there's a seasonal high groundwater table, and then in the summer, the groundwater table might go down. And over time, it leaches out the soils because the groundwater table is fluctuating. But that has to happen over time. I don't know when they excavated that area, but it may be, as Ralph is saying, that it's functioning as a wetland. But even if it just hasn't had enough time so that the soils show are characteristic of wetland soils, but eventually it seems that will happen. That's actually one of the neighbors asked about questions. Does anybody know when that area was excavated? Because it does seem like there's like groundwater breakout right there, where there was water flowing down the hill. So do we know when that was excavated? Any of the neighbors? No, okay. Well, but to Ralph's point, it does functionally seem like it's a wetland, even if it doesn't have the soil indicators. But it certainly has the hydrology, and we really didn't take a close look at the botany.
So thank you. I think therefore it would be within our purview to require that the water table be monitored over a number of seasons to determine whether that is enough of an effect to be considered functionally a wetland. Obviously, it's been a very wet summer, so it's a little hard to know just by the time when we've had that site visit. But I suspect that it's a more permanent or semi-permanent condition than just a one-time thing. Since we're continuing, we can consider it later.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, I can't recall. I don't recall your name,
Mr.
sir.
Wenzel.
Mr. Wenzel.
Lloyd Wenzel, 176 Fisher Road. I have kind of a question and a statement. Living here for 15 years or so, I've come to believe and look across the street towards the apple orchard, and most of the property that we have up in that area is ledge. On top of the ledge is some sort of silt or ground. Is it not feasible that the water is following the ledge under the surface, and that is coming up there because it's following the ledge? And if it is now, it's going to continue to do that? So I think the question of, is that going to become a wetland, or it is a vessel of water coming through there? Does that not mean that we have a bigger problem than what we'll maybe looking at directly? We've walked the land, we've seen how the land is, and like I mentioned at the last meeting, we never passed that brook that flows between my land and his land coming down from up the road, which is not a yearly thing, but I'll tell you, it's running again, and it didn't stop much this summer. Just something to think about in the overall picture.
Thank you, Mr. Wenzel. Anybody else? Any commissioners? Can I have a motion to continue this to the December meeting?
Which would be the second, wait, no, Wednesday, right? The 14th. No, I'm sorry, the 15th, Wednesday the 15th. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Second
It was
Wednesday?
Second Wednesday, okay, so the first Wednesday is the 1st, so it would be the
So you wouldn't forget it.
Wednesday, December 8th.
Wednesday, December 8th. Can I have a motion to continue this to Wednesday, December 8th meeting?
I motion to continue this to Wednesday, December 8th.
And a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Commissioner Bro?
Aye.
Commissioner Baker?
Aye?
Commissioner Christian?
Aye.
Commissioner Donnelly?
Aye.
Commissioner Helene?
Aye.
Okay, Commissioner Satterfield, aye. Thank you very much, folks, for coming in. We appreciate that you took your time to come and talk with us. We'll see you on the 8th. Okay.
Snow mill.
We're going to get through this, folks. Under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 13, Section 40, the Fitchburg Conservation Commission will open the hearing for notice of intent, Grief Incorporated Snow Mill Pond Dam Improvements, 100 Newark Way. Daniel, we're moving on to Grief.
And there should be
Snow
a
Mill Pond.
couple of engineers from Ty and Bond who are waiting.
I have 3 people on my list. I'm in the process of promoting them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bullock.
All right.
I want to thank everybody for your patience as we move through the agenda. Mr. Rowe, it's nice to see you. Okay.
all the way at the end.
Oh, that's a fancy one.
Give Mr. Bolek a chance to
Do you know this, Dan?
bring everybody on.
Can't think of it.
Oh, it's a very prominent.
They should all be in and ready to speak if they so desire.
Thank you. All right. So where am I here? So we have, who do we have here as the engineer? If we could, you could identify yourself and please speak to the notice, how you'll be meeting the performance standards for this project. Will low-impact development practices like green infrastructure be included in this project? How will this project meet the local bylaw standards? Who do we have here?
We have Melissa Cody from Ty and Bond.
Unfortunately, Miss Melissa couldn't make it. She had a conflict with another Conservation Commission meeting tonight. So I'm Steve Soroka. I'm a senior engineer with Ty and Bond. I'm the project manager for this project. And on here also is Christina Pasella, who's an environmental scientist with Ty and Bond also. So we are going to be standing in for Melissa today.
Okay. And we get the page up, that shows the plans.
Thank you for coming, Mr. Soroka.
Oops, I went by it already. Sorry, Steve, I'm just trying to go up to get where the plan starts.
No problem. I guess I could just mention a couple of administrative items while we're getting the plans up. Is the proof of the abutter notifications were provided to Mike via email, and Ty and Bond has not received any calls from any abutters. And we've also forwarded on Mass DEP's issuance of the file number 155-0713, with which Mass DEP did not have any comments.
So Steve, do you think this is the appropriate sheet to start off on, or this is page 48 of the filing?
Yeah, I mean, this one shows the proposed conditions, so I can go through what the project scope is. The dam itself is comprised of two structures, which one is the stone masonry spillway portion of it, and then along the north side, which you're seeing here, is the dike, which has its own components, which has a section that is both concrete and stone masonry, a section that's concrete with an earthen embankment, and then another section to the west that is just earthen embankment. This dam is a high hazard dam, so it's inspected every 2 years per the Office of Dam Safety guidelines. So the purpose of this project is twofold: to both address some deficiencies that have been identified in the Phase 1 report, as well as deficiency identified in the 2019 hydrologic and hydraulic analysis that was completed. So addressing the Phase 1 deficiencies, I guess the first one, I can talk about the concrete deficiencies. There are some spalled and cracked areas on the gatehouse, which is located between the spillway and the dike, as well as on the concrete wall. We're proposing to put in a temporary cofferdam to de-water that area so that they can get in there and repair the eroded concrete, which is right along the water line. And the second portion of this for addressing Phase 1 deficiencies is erosion was identified on the upstream slope along the water line. So common dam practice is to put in slope protection, which is typically comprised of riprap. So we're putting in a filter fabric with a crushed stone bed and then 2 feet of riprap on top of that. While that's being done, there'll be a turbidity curtain that's installed. We're planning on doing this in the wet. Once that is done, they will put in the sedimentation control barrier that you see, and then they will put in overtopping protection. Now, what the result of the 2019 H&H study was that this dam does not have the hydraulic capacity to pass the 1/2 probable maximum flood, which for this area is 15.4 inches of rain in a 24-hour period. So that dike would get overtopped by about 2.5 feet. Now, if the dike starts overtopping and runs down the earthen embankment as it is now, it will cause erosion, which could eventually lead to a dam failure, which obviously creates some significant downstream impacts. So the plan here would be to excavate a portion of the embankment, regrade it so that the slopes are a little bit flatter than they are. There's a section that's pretty steep. Put in a GeoWeb membrane that would go from basically where the sediment control barrier is and the dike wall down to, well, down almost to the road, that whole shaded area. And then on top of that goes 4 inches of loam and seed. So it'll look like a grass slope. It'll just have extra erosion protection beneath that grass. And that is pretty much the scope of what the work would be.
Dan, there's a couple of profiles, A and B here, and if I flip to the next page, I think we'll be able to see, yeah, if I back out a bit.
And you can see in the profiles, that for the riprap slope protection, we are cutting into the embankment just enough to put in the filter fabric, the crushed stone bed, and the riprap so that we're not changing the slope along that edge.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Soroka. Let's open the floor for public comment. Is there anyone here that would like to speak about this? Please come to the podium and state your name and address for the record. Speak clearly so we can understand you. Mr. Bullock, is there anybody in the waiting room that would like to speak about this, to your knowledge?
I believe a Mr. Brian Canty.
Oh, he's with Grief, yes.
Okay,
He's the
so he's
manager.
with the engineers.
Okay, then nobody else.
Thank you. All right, hearing none from the public, is there any commissioners that would like to speak?
I would.
Go ahead, Rob.
Mr. Soroka, can you please explain whether your proposal has been reviewed and approved by the Office of Dam Safety?
The Office of Dam Safety is currently reviewing our Chapter 253 permit application.
Thank you.
Any other commissioners? Would we like to schedule a site visit? Does anyone think they would like to see to have a site visit? Okay.
Sure.
Mr. Soroka, we typically perform our site visits on Saturday mornings, but we can make changes to that if necessary. Let's,
I mean, I think we could make a Saturday morning work.
okay, so.
Steve, I know a few of the folks that I corresponded with are in New York State. Do you have somebody, Ty and Bond, more local than that?
Well, I think it was Christina that is in New York State, but myself and Melissa are both out of the Westfield, Mass office, so we would be the ones that would attend the site visit. Either one of us would.
That's Elizabeth Drive, yeah.
Okay, so November's tough because we've got the 20th. Does anybody have any thoughts about November 20th, commissioners? Or should we look at December 4th? I can't do December 4th, but if other people can, I mean, we've got 2 dates on the table here. November 20th,
I could do the 20th.
okay.
Can do the 20th.
Commissioner Bro, is the 20th okay for you?
Yeah, I was just waiting for everyone to go around the table, but yeah, either is okay with me.
Okay. Mr. Smith, do you think you could make it for the 20th, or?
Yes, that should work for me as well.
Okay. So if this gentleman, Westfield, how long do we need to get, I mean, at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock to get here?
10 o'clock is fine. I can make 10 o'clock.
Okay. So 10 o'clock, does that work for the commission? 10 o'clock?
Yep.
That works.
Okay, so we're going, where should we meet for that? Where do you recommend we meet for that?
On this plan, a little bit further to the right, there's a parking lot. We could meet right there.
Do you have an address for it?
We go off of, remember when we took a walk up on, oh gosh, the contaminated spot there? We went up that long driveway, and then instead of turning to the left, we kept going to the Newark Group's building. Plus, there's another shorter driveway
I have no
before
idea.
you.
But do we have, I mean,
We'll draw a little map.
okay, well, we'll have Mike send out a map when he sends out the meeting notice for the site visit.
Okay, just to the right of these metal buildings that are shown here, there's a parking area that we could meet at.
Okay,
Yeah, off of Princeton Road, off of Route
Okay.
30.
okay. All right, then, can we have a motion to continue this, hearing until,
I move that we continue in the hearing until the next regular meeting.
thank you. And do we have a second?
I second.
All right, let's call the roll. Commissioner Bro?
Aye.
Commissioner Baker?
Aye.
Commissioner Christian?
Aye.
Commissioner Donnelly?
Aye.
Commissioner Helene?
Aye.
Commissioner Sarahfield approves. Thank you very much. We'll see you on November 20th at 10 a.m. Okay.
And when is the next meeting?
A couple of weeks after that, it would be Wednesday, December 8th.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. So moving forward, let me just look and see what's on next. Okay, to other business. Just as a update, Brian Bro has generously offered to chair the subcommittee on violation of enforcement orders, and I think we can all say the commission appreciates that, his service in that capacity. And that being said, we've got Woodland Estates, under other business, Woodland Estates Manufactured Home Park on Ringe Road. Yeah, you got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Sitting on.
And we've got Mr. Jamie Rowe here to discuss this. Do we need to give a background first, Michael?
Well, quickly, there was, unless you want to go, Jamie, there was an order of conditions issued ages ago.
Correct.
And there's been work on that project in fits and starts over the years, but the point of this is that there is some things that weren't exactly according to the plan, and the order of conditions has expired by now. So rather than at least to start the discussion about how we can remedy the situation, Jamie offered to come to the commission and speak informally.
What he said.
Welcome back, Mr. Rowe. It's nice to see you.
Good evening. Jamie Rowe from Whitman and Bingham Associates, the division of Haley Ward. And I'm here to have a very informal and proactive discussion with everybody regarding the Woodland Estates project. About a month or two ago, I received a phone call from Tim Smith. And Tim, actually, Mike, I emailed you the site plans. You have it in your email if you want to put that up on the screen, if possible. We had a conversation about something that was going on at the Woodland Estates, and it centered around there was some water ponding at the very end of the cul-de-sac, and it was actually backing up onto an abutter's property. And so I gave Mark a call, had a nice conversation with Mark, had a couple conversations with Mark. Mark is the abutter. And I had a site walk with Mark as well on the site. And so there's definitely water backing up onto the abutting property and ponding on Woodland Estates property. And the area of this ponding is not under the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission. There's no buffer zones or wetlands anywhere near what's going on. My recommendation with respect to this is to have a conversation with the Planning Board and Mike O'Hara and have the Planning Board take the lead with respect to the ponding issue on the abutter's property and on Woodland Estates. I'm happy to have that conversation with you as well if you want, and walk the site with you also. It's whatever you want. But my recommendation is it's probably better suited for the Planning Board. At that time, we also talked about a few other things regarding blasting and hammering. It was a very common sense comment from Mark that this shouldn't be done on the weekends, and quite frankly, I agree with him. I spoke to my client, and so to that regard, what we're going to do is I'm going to send an email to Mike O'Hara asking the Planning Board to incorporate the detail of my email into the project file, that there will not be hammering and there will not be blasting on the weekends. And if you could forward that to the fire department, I would appreciate that as well. In those conversations I've had with Mark, Tim, and Mike O'Hara as well, Mike brought up the fact that the order of conditions has expired, and that's really why I'm here. So we're willing to do one of two things, and it's completely up to the Conservation Commission, whatever you want to do. All the work, if you go to sheet 1, Mike, that I emailed over to you, on sheet 1, it basically shows the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission as you approved it many, many years ago. All that work has been completed. It's all done. So we can do one of two things. We can actually ask and request a certificate of compliance and start the inspection process in which Whitman and Bingham will go out to the site, inspect it, write a letter to the Conservation Commission and fill out Form 8A, I believe. In the letter will state that the project has been completed in general accordance with the order of conditions in the reference site plan, except for the following. And we'll list those exceptions. And then we can have a discussion about those exceptions, whether you feel they warrant a waiver or would you like them completed, right? And then we can go through that process. Or we can file a notice of intent and continue this and then go through the certificate of compliance procedure at a later date. It doesn't matter to us. Happy to do either or with the commission. If the commission wants to set up a site walk on the date you're going to be walking that other project, I'm happy to meet you out there as well and go over everything also. So again, very informal but proactive conversation. Didn't want this to warrant an enforcement order by the commission. We want to be cooperative, and the fact that I'm here before you instead of at home on a Zoom call, we will follow through with this. Not a problem at all.
Thank you, Mr. Rowe.
Thank you.
Do we have anybody in the audience who would like to speak? No abutters that would like to speak.
So Jamie, if I could, the gist of it is the area that's shown on sheet 1 that we're
Correct.
seeing, all that work is complete, and you can ask the commission for certificate of compliance.
Yes, yeah, I haven't done a full inspection, but what I didn't want to do is do the full inspection and waste my time and my client's money unless, because if the commission wanted a notice of intent filed instead of going the certificate of compliance route, we'd be happy to do that also.
So what about what is shown on sheet 2, though?
Sheet 2, on sheet 2, there's no buffer zones or any wetland resource areas whatsoever, so there's really no jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission on sheet number 2 that I know of.
Okay.
Do we want to have a site visit, and do we want to stop there on the 8th?
Yeah, you could even do that before 10 if you wanted to get out earlier.
Yep. We want to head out, do you want to go there before 10 o'clock on the 8th?
9:30?
I guess I would ask, if there's no if it's not in our jurisdiction, why would we perform a site visit? Or do we disagree that it's not in our jurisdiction?
I concur. Just a couple of questions. The Conservation Commission issued an order of conditions that dealt quite specifically with the road and access to the site. But this is outside the scope of the order conditions that we previously had. Does it involve wetlands or buffer zone? Does it involve erosion? And does it involve serious flooding?
Well, serious to me versus the abutter, I'd like you to ask him, but it is not serious in my book. I think it's easily resolved with some grading and maybe some drainage in the future.
To support Mr. Baker's comment, if it's outside of our jurisdiction and can be handled with the planning department, as has been offered, then so be it.
Just to clarify, this has nothing to do with the old order of conditions, that it has no impact on that?
Yeah, the old order of conditions has expired, and the old order of conditions didn't really cover the area that we're talking about with respect to the ponding.
Madam Chair, could I ask if Mr. Christian has any feeling about this one way or the other? I'm not as a commissioner, but as a abutter.
Well, as an abutter, so you're telling me you're going to take care of what are you going to do?
Well, a couple of things. I offered to come and walk the property with you, which I did, and I fully understand what the situation is, number one. Number two, I offered to come to the Conservation Commission and discuss it with them, number one, and discuss the expiration of the order of conditions, which I'm doing as well. I think your comments with respect to the ponding are better meant for the planning board with their site plan approval and special permit that they've issued, because there's no jurisdiction under the Conservation Commission rules and regs. We talked about the blasting, and we talked about the hammering, which I talked to my client. She has no issues with that whatsoever. So I'm going to be writing an email to Mike O'Hara to incorporate that into the planning board record.
How the farming will be handled?
How the blasting and hammering will be handled, yes. We won't do any of that, or the client won't do any of that on the weekends, and I want that on record with the planning board and with the fire department as well. So that'll stop that if it's going on. The ponding, I have some solutions in my mind. A little grading will go a long way, removing that pile of fill that's there as well, and maybe putting a swale in so that everything is positively draining and it's not ponding itself. So I think we can accomplish that. But I think the discussion with respect to the ponding is better situated with the planning board and not the Conservation Commission. But we will take care of it, no question. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Are you comfortable with that explanation? As an abutter?
That's not
Okay.
So did we never issue you guys a certificate of compliance in the past?
No. So the order of condition, we filed a notice of intent, got an order of conditions, the work was completed in the buffer zone, and that's primarily at the beginning of the project, at the existing road, accessing the back land, right? There's a culvert and some wetland filling, et cetera. So that all has been completed. They've been accessing the site through this driveway for many, many years. But the order of conditions has expired. So in that said, there's two ways to handle it, right? We can request a certificate of compliance for the work that's been done, and you have every right to issue that. Or you can say to me, file a notice of intent. Let's get this back on the books, and then we'll move it forward. Doesn't matter to me either way. I do recommend a site walk with everybody so you can see it, and then you can tell me exactly what you'd like to do on the site walk.
Yeah, so I think we should probably go to the site walk, make sure that they are in compliance, and then we can get it cleared up,
Okay.
I would imagine,
Sure.
right?
If we have a quorum, we can make a vote on the site walk at that time.
I'd just be asking for direction, that's all. Yeah.
For the what?
I'd just be asking for direction. Would you like me to continue with an inspection, a report, come back to you with a certificate of compliance request? Or would you like me to come back with a notice of intent and go through the process? That's all.
Mr. Smith, have you resolved your internet connection issues? Tim texted me and said he was having issues with his internet.
I did email Tim Smith copies of the site plan today, just so he could follow through.
Hi, guys, I'm back on the call. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Can you repeat the question, please?
Did you have any comments on, well, first of all, we're going to do the site visit. Mr. Rowe has offered to meet with us on site to go over what's happening and what's going on. But he also is asking for to request the certificate of compliance with the inspection and start the inspection process, or to file a new notice of intent. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Jamie, has there been any changes to the plan?
So I can't say for sure, Tim, that there are no substantial changes comparing the construction with the approved site plans. I haven't done my final inspection yet. So I don't know if there's any substantial changes.
Yep. Just one more comment. I know you said that the impounding of the water near the cul-de-sac area really is a planning board issue. And I agree with you that that area is not within a resource area or buffer zone. However, so one of the things that the commission has seen is where, let's say in a couple instances now, where there was drainage going into a wetland, and then a road was installed, and the road prevented the drainage from getting into the wetland, and then the wetland dried up. So when the wetland dries up, it's getting altered, and it is within the commission's jurisdiction. So one thing that I would be looking at is what was originally proposed, where was the water under the original proposal where the commission approved an order of conditions, where was the water going, and is that still the same case? Because if you're impounding the water, you're impacting the hydrology of the site, and my question is, ultimately, will that impact a resource area? So, and I don't know the answer to that. I'm just posing it as a question at this point.
Yep.
So I know you're saying it's a planning board issue, but I think the Conservation Commission does have the right to examine that question.
If I may.
Sure.
I have no problem walking the site with the commission. I hope you're present as well, Tim. I don't see any impact to any wetland resource area or buffer zone with respect to the ponding issue whatsoever. But happy to walk it with you guys and have that discussion in the field. Not a problem at all. And
Yeah, I think the walk will clarify.
And if the commission decides that you have jurisdiction, I have no problem with that at all. It's just my opinion that I think it's better suited for the planning board for many reasons. That's all.
So on the, thank you both. On the Saturday, November 20th, is there, if we get to Woodland Estates at 8:30, does that give us enough time, an hour, to have the site visit and still give us time to get to the other visit, this Snowmill Pond at 10?
I think so.
I have to believe, knowing the site the way I do, if we're there at 8:30, ready to walk the site and look at some areas, you'll be out of there in 45 minutes.
Okay.
All right.
So what date are you looking at?
So maybe 9 o'clock would be better choice than 8:30, if that's true.
The 20th, Saturday, November 20th.
November 20th? Perfect.
I would suggest if, and I trust his judgment, if it's going to take us 45 minutes, 9 o'clock would be a better time to assemble there than
That's true.
8:30.
Okay, so 9 o'clock at Woodland Estates on Saturday, November 20th. And then we'll head over to the other site visit. 15 minutes should be enough time to get there? Mm-hmm. Okay. Mr. Smith, does that work for your schedule?
It does, thank you, Madam Chair.
And Commissioner Bro?
Yep.
Okay. And to the abutter, does that work for your schedule? Thank you. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rowe. It's nice to see you.
Nice to see all of you. Have a great night. And great new meeting room, huh?
Thank you for your patience, Jamie.
Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.
Okay, moving forward, Mr. Bolak, we've got Mad River Solar on Ashburnham Street. If there's anyone on Zoom waiting for this?
I believe there's 4.
Okay. So why don't you load them onto the meeting, and in the meantime, we'll start. So that's probably the engineers and everybody. Or Mad River, or is that the Mad River people?
This is not Mad River's doing, understand.
Okay.
But maybe I can give a little bit of
Yeah,
background.
let's start, Mike. Give us a background for the commissioners who are not familiar.
I've met many of you before. When this was first, and I'm sorry, I just have a small version of the Mad River Solar Plan. That was submitted to, if the commission remembers, both to the Planning Board and the Conservation Commission, and approved. There's a valid order of conditions, which has been recorded. As part of the initial review process, the folks at Mad River Solar agreed to provide a larger buffer than they had originally anticipated. And so there's a depth of 100 feet, although that was increased, wasn't it, Joyce? 125, right. So that buffer area was to be left undisturbed, and until recently it has been undisturbed. The Mad River Solar folks are in the process of getting their other permissions, financing, the state solar tax credits, etc. The last conversation I had with them back in the springtime here was that they were still going ahead with the project. In the meantime, property owner arranges for a forest cutting plan to be done and prepared by a registered forester in the state. And apparently the forester and the timber harvester, Central Mass Tree, was completely unaware of the Mad River Solar plan and that there was an area that was to be no cut. And I heard from several folks, both on Stickney and on Ashburnham Street, gave the state forester for this area. I'm looking at you, Mark, and because I know you, and his name went out. Mike Downey, thank you. Had a long conversation with Mike at the end of Friday. Mike had been on site for half of the day on Friday, checking everything out, and I think he's met a couple of the abutters. From what I get from Mike, from verbally and from email, that things were done according to the approved cutting plan. He wasn't going by Mad River Solar's plan, obviously, so, but he's okay with, as far as the state forester. Mike did suggest there was areas where felled logs were piled up, and, you know, Central Mass Tree was told, you know, get those out. There's a way to get out through the adjoining property, so get those out and off the site. And Mike will continue to go out there and monitor the forest cutting. But back to the solar project plan, now that the property owner, John DeNewville, is aware of this, and he's in New Jersey, by the way. I haven't spoken to him directly, but I did get a call from Attorney John Barrett this afternoon, who just kind of wants to know the lay of the land. John was the Assistant City Solicitor here for a period of time, so I know John. And I said tonight's meeting was just to kind of be an FYI, state what happened, and kind of work toward an eventual resolution of the matter. Whether that's additional plantings to restore that buffer zone that was cut into or what, but I think that's the gist of it from my point of view. And I think we need to get other parties in the room, like the gentleman from Mad River Solar, probably John Barrett, and whatever, maybe the engineer that Mad River used to prepare this plan, to see what might be suggested in order to restore that buffer. So,
I have a question.
I know there's a lot of folks, you know,
Yeah,
in
sure.
the wings in here.
Who is John Barrett representing?
The property owner, who is John DeNewville, and still. The property hasn't transferred to Mad River Solar yet.
Okay.
Okay. I remember the discussion being that they were gonna carve off a portion of this and donate the rest of it to one of the local land trusts. Last I heard from that land trust, there isn't a final deal. That was North County Land Trust, by the way.
I'm sorry, is it a final deal or there isn't?
No.
Who do we have? Who do we have? Do we have anyone? Okay, so we have butters here. We're going to get to you. Who do we have, Mr. Bolek, on deck?
Mr. DeNewville is in the Zoom, and then there are 3 abutters.
Okay, thank you. Mr. DeNewville, is this the owner?
That's right. It has been for like 40 or 50 years.
And then we have some abutters. Who do you recommend? We have a recommendation of how we go. Okay.
I think it might be fair to hear from the property owner, just to see what he has to say.
All right, Mr. Bolek, why don't you welcome Mr. DeNewville into the meeting?
They're all in the Zoom lobby as panelists. Mr. DeNewville can begin speaking whenever he wishes.
Thank you, Mr. Bolek.
Got it. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And I don't think I've ever been to a Fitchburg meeting in all these 50-odd years of investing in Fitchburg land. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm really here to listen. I'm not directly involved in the management of this solar project, so I can't really speak to the details. I think all that has been accomplished in the last few days is to verify that the forest management plan has been followed according to plan, and will require that supervision to continue that Mr. Downey is going to provide. And until that project is done and he signs off on it, it's still subject to review. And and then we move to the solar project, and if it turns out, and I can't really, unfortunately, comment on this, if it turns out that the cutting that was done under the forestry plan is in conflict with the requirements of the conservation plan for the solar project, then we will try to remedy that to everybody's satisfaction. Basically, that's about all I have to say, but I'd be happy to answer questions if anybody has questions for me.
Thank you, Mr. DeNewville. Is Mr. Downey on this call?
No, the forester.
Okay. Let's just jump right in. Who'd like to go first? Councilor Kuchar, would you like to start the proceeding?
I'm just here to support my ward residents as well as the neighbors. I am not an abutter. I think the abutter should go first. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Go ahead. Please state your name and your address for the record, and speak clearly into the microphone.
Karen Capone, 696 Ashburnham Street. I understand that the forestry project is separate from the solar project, and it was done. I did talk to the forestry department that it was done in compliance. What I'm here for is to ask the commission that if this solar project goes through, that they reassess, especially the hydrology of that area. It has changed. The main logging road leading down from Tom Jocko's land into this property, the equipment is phenomenal. It's basically tanks, and it's created streams that normally in the past ran westerly. They're running south, straight down. I'm concerned if the solar project never gets approved, what is going to happen to that land, runoff, erosion. I'd like to see some kind of measures put in place to prevent further damage because it's happening. I took a walk out on there on Sunday. I took some videos. Again, I took it yesterday, and there's more runoff, and it hasn't even rained. So my issue is that the commission please take a look at those solar projects to make sure that they can put in place the remedies they were going to, the swales, if I'm pronouncing that right, and the retention ponds, all that were going to be put in place before the solar farm was put in to prevent runoff. Now, behind my property, it's essentially clear cut. The cut trees that were going to be chipped to create the swales aren't there anymore. So what is going to happen and how long? I mean, now it's been several years that we've been waiting on the state to approve this plan. It hasn't happened. It may not happen. And if that doesn't happen, what is going to happen to all the abutters? And that's my issue, not the forest, except to put in place further damage. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Capone. I want to thank everybody for waiting so long to talk. This can be frustrating. Who would like to go next? Everybody's welcome to speak. We want to hear from you.
We have plenty to say. I just was hoping other people would put their 2 cents in first, and I'll follow up with what's missing.
Okay. Let's just, I can't make you come up. We'd like to hear you speak, though.
There's probably folks online, too.
Okay, go ahead.
And people online can talk too. I don't know if they realize that, but Eileen Sheehan, I'm at 227 Stickney Road. I'm across
I'm ready to talk.
Perhaps we'll have the in-person abutters speak first, and then we can go to the Zoom abutters, and I'll list off the abutters in order, and we'll give them the slots according to whatever we do there.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm within the 200-foot abutter list. I'm listed on it 4 times. I didn't get a notice. It's supposed to be certified or hand-delivered. I didn't get anything. That's one issue. I feel in the overall sight of the whole thing that the solar farm was almost like a screen to hide an aggressive cutting plan, that they went from using 25 acres to cutting 40 or more, that they went from 125 foot and more setbacks, if you include like 300 or 400 feet from Stickney Road, to cutting right up to people's backyards. It's just a really sad situation. The cutting map is, if you match it up with the solar plan map, there's huge discrepancies. There's 2 wetland areas along Stickney Road. On the cutting plan map, there's only 1. So it rules out a whole area of wetlands. And they cut right through the wetlands and cut up to people's backyards again. Both maps have not addressed the dump. And in the area along Stickney Road, there's no wetland cut in the mapping and the literature. Harvesting in wetlands, it's not listed there, but they did it anyway. They supposedly were supposed to send a 10-day notice to the regional office and to the Fitchburg Conservation Commissioner on what they were going to do. I don't know if Mike got it.
No, we got it.
You got it, but you didn't notice all the missing things?
There was a buffer area, a no-cut area, which we knew was going to be.
But it looks like it only addresses 1 stream and not the 2.
Okay, well, to put them down side by each and take a look, no, because we are sent these kind of as a courtesy, because the approval authority is the state forester.
But he'd never been there.
Oh, okay, well, I mean,
And did he even see, he never saw the solar plan map either because he didn't even know it.
Yep, he had no clue about that.
Let's just have one at a time, please, so we can identify who's speaking at any moment in time, if you would. Everybody will have a chance to speak, and if you want to come back and speak again, you're welcome to. That's totally fine. Everybody needs to have a chance to speak, but we have to be able to know who we're talking to.
There's supposed to be a file number posted. I went up to the landing, I didn't see it. I asked Karen if it was down the other end on Ashburnham Street on the original landing area, and she hasn't seen it.
Just a second, Michael, does a forestry, a forest cutting plan require a file number?
No.
Yes.
Not from the
There's
Conservation
one right in the
Commission, which I think
paperwork.
is the-
So, from the state?
Right.
Does it
There are
have to be
exemptions
posted?
to the, and John Putinen, God bless him, would know.
No, we'll get him involved in this. I
up
just
and
didn't,
down.
yeah, we'll get him
But
involved. I just didn't think tonight was the night to do
There are
that.
certain,
Okay.
there are a fair amount of exemptions that forestry practices have. You know, they don't have to file, other than a courtesy, this forest cutting plan with the local conservation commission. You know, you can cross through wetlands as long as you take steps to prevent, you know, adverse effects and get the state forester to okay it, which happened.
Yeah, I think it's important to note here that the state forester it kind of trumps the local commission in this capacity, which, let's just keep going. Keep going, Ms. Sheehan.
I read through the forest cutting practices thing, and it says that there's supposed to be a certificate posted. Okay, so to me, there's excessive cutting. There was not supposed to be any cutting of red oak and white pine between 10 and 14-inch diameter, and a whole lot of other wood. Red oak, black birch, red maple, black elm, I think, white pine that are less than 8 inches. They were only supposed to cut 70% of the trees and leave 30, but it seems like they left about 10%. There were flagged areas that were not supposed to be cut, and the trees with the flags were cut off. So there's flags laying around on the ground. There's codes in here, stream crossings, and the stream crossing areas were all along Ashburnham Street. There were not supposed to be any along Fisher Road, along Stickney Road, and they did cross there because there's two streams and they only have one on the map. The wetland crossings, again, that same issue. There's only one wetland crossing, but they went through multiple. There's supposed to be filter strips, 3 areas. There was none along the area designated on Stickney Road, and there's 2 areas along Ashburnham Street, which Karen says that she hasn't seen yet either, and these are all behind her property. Harvesting in wetlands, there's none along that area in Stickney Road, but they did harvest there. It's supposed to be a long-term forest management plan, and there's a bunch of benefits to doing it that way. One is to produce an immediate income, but to maximize a long-term income. They haven't left enough trees to have a long-term benefit.
On that, if I may, because we've got to revise, Eileen's right. They checked basically they checked the wrong box. If you look at these, and Mark, if you want to pass one over on the 3rd page, where the landowner signs, you either check the box, it's long-term forest management, and boy, my copy is really faded. Plan management of the forest to achieve one of the following objectives, produce, for the long term, enhance wildlife habitat and improve recreational opportunities. Anyway, for the good of the forest. And they should have checked short-term harvest trees with the main intention of producing short-term income, with minimal consideration given to improving the future forest condition. So Mike the state forester, Mike Downey, told them to submit a revised forest cutting plan, which I got over yesterday. And now they checked the box, short-term harvest, and there's a couple of other notes to it. So there's an amended forest cutting plan. So most of the ones that you see coming across the desk are long-term management. You want to continue the use as a forest, and you're just improving it, not just removing all the income that you possibly can.
I actually had a question about that, that amendment, but let's keep going, and we want to hear from we want to give everybody a chance to speak.
Well, there were quite a few points as to the long-term plan, but evidently it's not a long-term plan, which was what I was pointing out. So basically, they were cutting based on the total economic value of the individual trees and just leaving residue trees of very poor quality, low value, and little to improve the future condition of the forest. There's supposed to be a plan to control erosion. They list the filter strips, which have not been in place. They do often use water bars, and there's none of those listed in there. The same thing with the retaining ponds. There's supposed to be stabilization requirements to be fulfilled by the completion of the operation. They're done logging. It's not done. This water flows into Phillips Brook, which then flows into the Nashua River. This is a big deal. And now it's you guys' job to protect the wetlands and to improve the forests and the habitat and all of that. And it's just like it seems to me like they purposely circumvented this, that the owner wanted to maximize his profits. He threw a smoke screen out there of the solar farm to get us complacent with it, give us everything we want, all the setbacks, the no cut zones, and then he hires a logging company to go in there and strip it. And now this is all done with the solar plan screen, inadequate butter notice. I'm on the 200-foot abutter list 4 times. I got no notice. And some people only got second ones. I don't know about everyone, but maps are incomplete. Like I said, the dump isn't in there. The second stream isn't in there. All the wetlands aren't in there. There's inadequate soil and erosion control practices. Overall non-adherence to the long-term forest management, but they just admitted that they didn't plan on doing that. And that seems like another smoke screen. You know, we're going to make the forest better. Oh no, we're going to cut everything down. Then the worst of it is, if they don't put the solar project in, what are they going to do to it? Is it going to lay barren forever? Are they going to build houses in there? I mean, that's even worse.
Thank you.
And there's a highlighted map of the solar farm with the 2 streams showing. And all of this was not supposed to be cut. They cut right up to these people's backyards.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Who's next? Thank you. And if you want to speak again, you're welcome to. Just let me know. Who'd like to go?
Ready.
Do we have somebody on Zoom who would like to speak? Can you state your name and address for the record, please?
Yep, my name is Mark Balf. I live at 178 Stickney Road.
Thank you, Mr.
And
Bell.
I have an issue with pretty much everything that's going on. So according to Mass, whatever it is, 137 through 40 through 46, you are supposed to give 10 days of notice previous to cutting any wood. So I received my notice on October 6th, and they started cutting land behind my house 13th, so that was 6 days. And I don't know, to me, that's not okay. Like, that's step one of not being compliant. So the second is the wetland scientist. Who is gonna come out and check on this when they're done? Because they didn't have one when they started this. Fitchburg has one, but the state doesn't.
Okay, Mr. Bell, thank you for those comments. Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Oh, yes.
We can't, I mean, we're just talking, this is our first time discussing this in public, and so we'd like to have your comments.
All right. So the state forester, Mike Downey, he came out here and he was great and all, but he had no clue that there was a perennial river, as the town of Fitchburg posted about. He had no clue about that.
Okay. Mr. Bell, do you have anything else to add? Is that correct? Is it Bell?
Bell.
Oh. Huh?
You got it.
Oh, okay.
So the town of Fitchburg has like this whole plan about the perennial river, but the state forester doesn't have that information. He just goes off of some plan, some redneck logger plans. Does that seem okay to you?
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Do you have anything else to add?
No.
Thank you. We appreciate your comments. Who's next? Who would like to go next? Is there anyone on Zoom who would like to speak now? If you could.
Yeah, it looks like Catherine has her hand up.
Catherine? Is there a Catherine?
Yes. Hi, this is Louis Haas, actually. Catherine is my wife.
Louis.
68
What was the
Ashburnham Street.
HOSS. I can see the names. You
Oh. What was the address, Mr. Haas?
680 Ashburnham Street.
Thank you.
Yes, I would just like to second the concerns raised by Mrs. Capone. We're her next door neighbors, and we moved into Fitchburg about 6 months ago, and we are also concerned about the altered hydrology back there, and in particular the logging road that runs downhill towards the back of our property. I can confirm, I've walked back there, that there's been running water coming down that hill, and after it rained, when the cutting project had been well underway, we had some streams running downhill in our backyard that we had never seen before, towards our house, with some water intrusion into our basement. So we are also concerned about that, and I shared those concerns with Mike Downey last week, and would just like to share them with the commission here. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haas. Is there anyone else on Zoom that would like to speak? Yes, please, Mrs. Caponi.
I did talk, Mike Downey I talked to twice on Friday. He did say that he reached out to the logging company to put in some kind of remedy to that water runoff. I know you can't answer this. I don't know what the timeline is for that, and I'm getting a little nervous, having seen a difference in 3 days. They haven't done anything yet except not to use that logging road, except for the top third part. They've taken a left off of it instead of coming straight down, but it hasn't stopped the flow. The flow has increased. I don't know if, as the Fitchburg Conservation Commission, if you have any ability to interact with the state in terms of asking when they're going to enforce those recommendations. He is coming out, he said several more times. I did email him he said he would come to this meeting if invited. I did email him to invite, but I didn't hear anything back. Maybe he was waiting for something more official. I'm not an official. But I just would hope that if there's any way you can intervene to just be sure those measures are put in place to create further damage.
Were we at your house yesterday?
Yes.
I'm so sorry. Okay, that's why you... Okay.
You were.
Everybody had masks. I'm so sorry. Okay. All right. So certainly, yes, we can, we'll be communicating with Mr. Downey about this. This was just our first conversation that we're having, and we do appreciate that everyone's here for this. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? I mean, this isn't the last of this. If you don't feel comfortable speaking tonight, that's totally fine. This isn't the last of it. And if you want to email Mike O'Hara or myself or any of the commissioners, you are welcome to do that, and you can copy your ward counselor. We'll certainly be following through on this issue to the best that we can. I just saw it yesterday, and it certainly is something that we need to start to look into. But I do want to have the rest of the commission know that we were warmly received by the abutters when Mark and I went there yesterday. And yeah, so we're going to start to figure this out. We've got our environmental consultant on the call here, and Mr. Smith, do you have anything that you'd like to add at this time?
Yes.
Tim?
Yeah, sure. So the project, what they've been doing is under the Forest Cutting Practices Act. And under the Forest Cutting Practices Act, it's the DCR or the state forester that has the regulatory authority to enforce the Forest Cutting Practices Act. And it sounds like from everything I've heard that's not being done, although I did read something where Mike Downey said that the site was in compliance, but again, from hearing from the abutters, doesn't really sound that way. I think it's a great idea to have, invite the state forester to the commission's meeting so that these issues can be discussed. Under the Wetlands Protection Act, forest cutting is exempted under, it's got an agricultural exemption if the applicant has filed a forest cutting plan, which in this case is what occurred. So really it's the DCR or the state that's supposed to be enforcing the forest cutting plan, and it sounds like there's a lapse in that. So again, really the commission, I think it's a great idea that the commission talk to the state forester.
Tim, Commissioner Bro, have we seen this before, or is this the first time?
This is the first time. So as was previously stated, whenever there's a forest cutting plan, the Conservation Commission gets a notice and a copy of the plan. And it sounded like that occurred, but again, it's up to the state forester to enforce the cutting plan.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I don't remember exactly when we conducted our site visit for Mad River Solar. Recollection is maybe it was 8-10 months ago, something like that.
I think it was longer, Ralph.
Yeah, that was before COVID.
Was it longer than?
Yeah, it was before COVID.
Oh, all right.
Pre-COVID.
Yeah, okay, well, whenever it was, we deliberated on their plan, and one of the things that we did was issue an order of conditions, which I recall pretty clearly included a number of different recommendations and requirements regarding preventing erosion and sedimentation from the stormwater runoff during the cutting. While my own personal views didn't prevail because I wanted to insist that there be low impact logging done there, but I was overruled on that. But nonetheless, there were various requirements that we put in place, and I would think from the description, if the abutters are correct, that they've been in violation with our order of conditions. So I think we need to take a close look at what those stated and see. I mean, I'm really disgusted by what I've heard. It should not occur. But of course, we have to go out and verify that your descriptions are what has actually happened. But it sounds to me like we need to revisit our order of conditions and find out what it was that we required of Mad River Solar. Now, the fact that this was done by the landowner, apparently somehow separate from Mad River Solar, is perhaps a complication that I don't quite understand how that works.
Madam Chair, Ralph is absolutely right. Site conditions have changed. We've heard that the wetlands have been altered, and based on the changing conditions, that order conditions may need to be modified. So it is something that the commission should look at again and ask Mad River to come back before the commission and assess what site conditions have changed and how it could impact the order conditions.
Thank you.
I second that, both of Dr. Baker and of Tim.
I have a hard time believing that we would have not had something in writing if we were cutting through wetlands and things like that. That's pretty egregious, and we typically do not approve that. So it sounds like they are in violation, and we need to promptly act on that violation.
I'd like to hear from the state forest office. At least they must have a Worcester-based office, like somebody locally who go through this on this one.
Yeah, Brian, the regional office is in West Boylston, actually, and I've talked to, a couple of us here have talked to Mark Downey several times. He's a good guy, but he's the one that takes care of the Forest Cutting Practices Act for this Central Mass area.
Commissioner Donald.
I'd like to separate the two, if I may. We have a solar array that we issued an order of conditions for, and we can act on any violations of those order of conditions. The other issue, and I think it's separate from the solar array, is a forest cutting plan. There's a disagreement between an abutter and the state forester that one says they're in compliance with the forest cutting plan, and the other suggests that they're not in compliance at all. They're not necessarily not following it, but they're in violation of many best management practices. How about that? Under the forest management plan. So the resolution for the runoff and for any violations of our order of conditions, we can hold them accountable for. What is the process to appeal the forest cutting plan not being met, or any shortcomings or best management practices that aren't being implemented? Does anyone at this table know? Tim, do you know? And that would be one direction to go on that forest cutting plan that the abutters are most impacted by.
Yeah, that's the frustrating part, Mike, is the Conservation Commission cannot enforce the forest cutting practices, the forest cutting plan, because that's under the Forest Cutting Practices Act, which is under the jurisdiction of the state forester, the TCR. So we do not have jurisdiction over the forest cutting plan, and that's where the enforcement issues are problematic. Where there's the violation occurred. It's not Mad River with their development of the solar facility.
But Tim, if they've caused erosion and sedimentation that's impacting wetlands, then I can't imagine that they get an exemption and that we can't act on it as a violation of that.
All right, everybody, hold on. Hold on, I'm taking notes.
But, you know, their exemption stops at the wetland edge. They can develop to the wetland edge. It doesn't mean that they can negatively impact a wetland. But again, the question is that what's the appeal process for an inability or an unwillingness to follow best management practices for the forest cutting plan? And if we can't handle it, these people, I think they're looking for some direction. And what we can give them is the solar array, which is the greatest. We have an order of conditions. It's in writing, and we'd have to go out there and see to it that it's met. That's a first step. And the other one is an appeal process for a forest cutting plan and not implementing best land management practices.
I'd like to bring something to the commission's attention. We just looked briefly at the forest cutting plan that was circulated. And it looks like that Mr. de Neuville's property only goes about halfway between Ashburnham Street and McIntyre Road. I happened to cycle past down McIntyre yesterday, and there's a big yard with a lot of logs and a ton of equipment up on McIntyre, which I assume is where all these trees must be being brought out. Well, they must be cutting on another property north of Mr. de Neuville's also.
Right.
Probably equally as large in size as the one we're discussing. So this is a bigger issue than simply the...
But Ralph, since that's a different property and different property owner, I think, there's a separate forest cutting plan for that.
Well, there might be, but if that cutting has also negatively impacted wetlands, then we need to expand our purview and look at both. It looked like a really big operation when I saw it yesterday.
Tim,
Sounds like there's a lot of tree loss and a lot of terraforming going on.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Bro?
I was just saying, it does sound like there's a lot of terraforming going on and that there's a lot of loss of trees.
Tim, I have Mr. Smith, if I can ask you, does the forest cutting management, the plan that the state has jurisdiction over, does that preclude our local bylaws? What are the impact of the state, the forest cutting management plan that the act, does that trump our local bylaws?
Tracy, go ahead.
Go ahead,
The
Mr.
state has different, hold on.
Who's speaking currently?
Is Mr.
Mark Bell.
Okay.
Mr. Mike Downey has a different plan than the town had originally planned on for the solar field. He doesn't have the plan for the wetlands or anything.
Tracy, in answer to your question, it is a very good question. I don't know the answer to it. I've got to look at the ordinance to see how it deals with the Forest Cutting Practices Act.
Okay, forest cutting. Thank you, Tim. Mike, do you have any comments on that? Do you have any thoughts on that, or, I mean, does
I agree
the
with
state?
Mr. Donnelly. It's kind of two issues, but you certainly have jurisdiction over the Mad River Solar site, so dealing with that initially.
No, I'm
just
just-
get people in the same room or on the same call.
No, and
include Mike
You've been doing a good job of
and-
that for the
and
last couple of days.
and the Mad River Solar.
No, I'm
folks.
just asking, does the Forest Cutting Act trump our local bylaws?
In a way, it does, I think.
I think we need to really dig deep and find some clarity on that. I would think that at some point, the state should have at least informed us if they were cutting in wetland, right? I don't know, but.
Well,
I'm in that.
We do have forest cutting plans, and we get these not infrequently.
But we've seen that they really were, they weren't comprehensive, right? They didn't really show the full scope of everything. Like, they didn't show that they were cutting through 2 separate wetlands.
Right, and back to an earlier point, it wasn't whatever, I think the term was Yahoo tree cutter, but it's the licensed forester that prepares the plan. So, I mean, if the state forester has problems with the plan or how it was done, I mean, he can take it up with the licensed forester. But
My other thought on this, just from looking at the paperwork, is my concern that it was filed as a long-term forest management plan. And
that was the state forester's concern, and that with the...
and then it got changed after all this happened. And that, I have some concerns about that. I also, to Ralph's point, think that we should be doing an inspection of the other operation that's happening right now to see what's going on there, considering what's in front of us right now, which doesn't help any of you, and I apologize for that.
Do we have any grounds to put like a cease order on these guys currently?
I don't think so. If they started installing solar panels tomorrow, yeah, because they're not,
But Mike, in our order of conditions, there were a set of steps way preceding any installation of solar. We did address the cutting part of this plan.
Yes, Ralph.
And we addressed the potential erosion and sedimentation and so forth that would occur during cutting. So that's what's going on right now.
Can I recommend something? Can we make available to the abutters the order of conditions? They'll do due diligence and pick it apart and find out the shortcomings of the order of conditions that we gave to Mass Solar. We can do likewise. we do a site visit to see that the order of condition is being met on the solar site. While we're there, we take the liberty of going to the abutting site of the other clear cut to the backyards of these people, and we're not enforcing or attacking a forest cutting plan, but rather we're looking for violations of the Wetlands Protection Act. And if a violation exists of the Wetlands Protection Act that's outside of a forest cutting plan, they had the right to do that. They had the exemption to do that. They don't have a runoff is significant. Wetland filling is significant. Though they're not exempt from any of those items, can we do that at the time? Can we pick a date simply for a site visit and see to it that the abutters have access to the order of conditions because they've got the time and the energy to pick it apart?
May I ask, before you speak, please, we have here our interim commissioner of Public Works. And I wonder, Nick, if you have any thoughts about this from the standpoint of your responsibilities.
So, just so everyone on the computer can hear. So until this begins impacting the city's right-of-way, I don't necessarily have a skin in the game, so to speak. But I understand kind of what's going on here. I'm in agreement that cutting the trees significantly alters the hydrology of the site. We've had a timber harvesting operation up off of Alpine Road that we dealt with during our recent paving project. I've witnessed a lot of water coming off that hill following that logging operation. We've also had a number of single-family homes built along McIntyre and Alpine roads in which the lots have been clear-cut. And I've talked to several residents located on the downhill side of that new development, and they've expressed significant observations of increased water runoff. And that's consistent with just general hydrology practices. I mean, if you cut trees that soak up the water, that water's no longer being sucked up by the trees and ends up running off and all that. Plus, you're changing the surface cover from a forested area to something that has more impervious area, which produces more runoff, and it produces runoff faster. So that creates issues downstream and downhill. So all that being said, I'd be surprised that an approved forest cutting plan wouldn't have some consideration given to the impacts of hydrology by cutting on the site. I don't know what level of detail that DCR goes into when they consider these forest cutting plans and review them and approve them. I'm just starting to kind of read through all this stuff during this meeting now. It seems like the landowner actually has all the power here, and they could call this operation off or temporarily halt it until we get to the bottom of this. So maybe the commission would be willing to consider asking the landowner to do just that until we can kind of figure this stuff out. The other person of authority is what's referred to in the MGL as the director or the director's agent, and I assume that means the state forester or his designee. That person can issue a stop work order and should do so if he inspects the site and notices discrepancies between what's being done and what's in the approved forest cutting plan. It sounds like there are discrepancies there between what's been approved and what they're doing. It also suggests that the director should issue a stop work order if they do not observe appropriate filter and buffer strips, widths, etc. And it sounds like those things aren't there on the site. So I think we need to have a conversation with the state forester. I'm surprised that he visited the site on Friday and said that everything was fine, because it doesn't sound like that's the case. But I'm also happy to review the forest cutting plan, Mike, if you've got a copy and you want to send that to me, and let the commission members know what my other thoughts might be.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Nick.
Okay, you're welcome.
Go ahead. Can you state your name, please?
Yes, good evening. I'm Joyce Jacobs. I'm 778 Ashburnham Street. I'm a butter to both projects. Couple of things I just want to update. Commissioner Donahue is right. This is really two separate entities. The solar plan that we've been working on for the last couple of years, and now this planned cut. And a lot of the neighbors are here tonight because it's sort of, we're looking for some direction as to who's kind of in charge and where do we go to monitor now what is going on. Everybody was all on board with what was set in place for the solar project and the conditions that were set out about how the cutting was going to take place, the berms that was set to be set up before the cut was to take place. We had that whole conversation when we did the walkthrough before the plans were approved for the solar project. Now that the owner, which he has the right to do, has come in and decided to do a complete cut, it's like that's sort of overridden the original solar plan. And I really, Mike, I'm surprised that the forester didn't have access to the fact that there is a plan for development of that parcel in place so that the buffer zones were not negated by what they're actually cutting. Now, on a side, as a private plan just cutting, the owner has the right to cut, basically even up to the property line if he wants to. The thing that's complicating all of this is that we have this solar panel plan in place with everything that was approved by the commission here and the planning board, and that is now out the window. So everybody's just sort of looking for direction as to who's in charge, what's acceptable, and if there are problems like the Caponis are having with the water runoff, who do they see to help remedy this situation? Right now, we're very lucky. We have not had any issues with water runoff on our property. That doesn't mean that that's not going to be the case going forward, because we had that concern with the original cutting from the solar plan. That's where the, buffers were going to be set up when we cut. So I guess all I'm saying is that what everybody here is looking for tonight is who's in charge and where do we go to find out what the next step is. I guess first now to monitor what this cut plan is and how it has impacted the terrain and the water runoff and what that's going to do. And then how does that impact the solar plan that we had all agreed to? So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, and by the way, the other property, Commissioner, that you're talking up, that's Tom Jocko's property, and apparently the cutter has gotten permission by way of also cutting some on Tom's property to use that as his staging area, so that the real cut has gone from the 40 acres from Deneuville to I don't know how much of Jocko's property he's cutting, but that is the deal as I understand it for them to set up the staging area to access off of McIntyre Road.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Caponi, did you have something to add?
Yeah, according to Tom, they cut 5 acres of his.
Okay.
Oh. Mike, can you give us some guidance on who's in charge?
There's several entities, right? But they each
Who
have their
can
own.
these people go
They
to?
each have their own thing, You got, really, as the state forester has been talked quite a bit about the cutting, but if it's cutting for a particular project like the solar field, then you have the. So I think reaching out and getting everyone together on a Zoom call and work out. I was glad that Mr. Deneuville is here, and I think still is there.
Well, something that this gentleman, I'm sorry, I forgot your name.
Nick Erickson.
Nick, something that Nick had said was that we could, as a commission, request that the landowner cease operations. I don't know if we as a commission want to go that route at all, but it sounds like he does have violations. And, in good faith, we could ask him to cease while we check into the violations, if he's going to have to remediate that.
I am concerned about that. And just because it is the logging company's responsibility to put in the measures to prevent further runoff per the state.
Right.
And if you stop them, then it's not going to happen until it's investigated. The cutting is done. Cutting's done. Now they're just pulling out all the lumber.
Okay.
So it's my opinion that I would rather that not happen, but I appreciate what you are proposing, because that's exactly my concern. All of us here were totally on board with the solar project. Given the conditions that this commission asked for, we were happy with those because you understood our concerns and we're addressing those. Now, it's a whole different forest. And it just has to be reevaluated so that proper measures are put in place, just as you proposed initially. Thank you.
One question I heard, I sensed is, I'm wondering if the owner, it's a common ownership, right? One owner, had two plans, solar plan and a forest cutting plan. Did he violate the solar project plan by hiring and filing a forest cutting plan on the remaining land? The plan that he presented for us for the solar farm said that there would be no cutting. And if that plan that was submitted to us included the land in question, I'm wondering if he gave up his right to clear cut that when we approved the plan that included that land. And then I also heard prior to the meeting that the land, this is to the Conservation Commission and not to the audience, the land was going to be given to a trust or perhaps the Conservation Commission as open space. It's another example where we get the spoils of a project, whether it be a sand pit, whether it be a hillside that's unusable, or that was something that was once a forest and now is a clear cut, which will regenerate. But what they tell you they're giving you and what you get are two different things. And the Conservation Commission, it kind of has to be vigilant in the future to see to it that what we're promised is what we get.
Thank you, Commissioner Donnelly. Okay, so I just want to thank everybody for coming, and I want to make sure that everybody who was in the Zoom waiting room had a chance to speak and have their concerns heard. I want to thank everybody for coming down tonight and for waiting through this extremely long meeting that's out of the ordinary for our commission. I want to thank Interim Commissioner Erickson for adding his comments on the fly like that, and that's most appreciated. So it does appear that this is going to be moving on. And Councilor Kuchar, thank you for coming tonight as well. And he did speak to me about this last week and brought it to my attention. So certainly we're going to be moving forward on this, and this was just our first meeting about it. And I agree with you, Ms. Caponi. It's probably not best to stop it because that'll just stop everything. So we do have a lot of things to talk about.
Room for questions?
Excuse me?
Do you have room for questions?
Can you let me know who's speaking?
Mark Balf.
Okay.
178 Stickney Road.
Okay, Mr. Bell. Go ahead, Mr. Bell.
All right, so the wetland scientist, who will be in charge of the wetland restoration behind my house for NBE Solar? Because there isn't one as of now.
So that's part of what this conversation is going to be. We need to identify the violations, and then the next step would be to request a plan to...
Well, there should be one in place for this. There should be a wetland scientist in place for this before anything starts.
Before the solar starts, yeah.
Okay,
Am I
thank you.
wrong?
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Did someone else talk?
Nope, I'm gonna keep going.
Tracy, it is past 9.
Yeah, it is past 9 o'clock.
And we do have a couple other quick
And we have a
things.
couple of other issues to get to.
We have until 10.
Why till 10?
Mr. Bell, do you have any more questions or concerns that we can listen to at this time?
Yeah, we have until 10, so.
Sorry, why do you have until 10? I mean, the commission's meeting is going to go as long as the commission chair determines. I think this room is booked until 10, but we do not have to stay until 10, like the planning board did last night.
Well, Mr. Bell, I just want to, do you have any more comments or to add? I'd like you to voice them if that's the case.
Yes,
Otherwise, we need to move forward.
I have tons.
We certainly understand what you're saying. We understand that.
Did you say you have none?
Yes, he said he had
No,
none.
I have a bunch.
Oh, one.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, so I've been in contact with the town, the DPW. The runoff from my street runs down my driveway and runs down the driveway. And yeah, I've been in contact with the town about that for months. And yeah, still have no answers. Town just, oh yeah, no big deal.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bell. We are, I think we're moving outside of what we're
Thanks.
talking about right now.
It's Valve, thanks.
And are you finished with your comments and questions?
I guess so.
Did he say yes? Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. We're gonna move forward. No, of course. Of course, this is, we all live in the same town. Thank you. Thank you. So,
Who's the man behind the door?
okay, we gotta move forward, Ms. Sheehan.
Is it just a TV television?
This isn't our last discussion of this. This isn't our last discussion of this, but thank you. Thank you for coming to.
Where did they go back then? Look at his equipment? Mike went by.
He's still here. He hasn't checked. Thank you for speaking.
I was going to tell him, he's an unhelpful cause.
I think the primary role this commission
Can I
can
make a
play is
motion?
just get parties together,
adjourn?
including Mike.
Yeah.
Motion to adjourn, or we have more
I
work?
certainly understand. Yeah.
We have more work?
Yes, we have more. We have an extension request. Moving forward with the discussion on the extension request, number 155-674. Ladies and gentlemen, if you could just move outside, thank you. Hi, Tom. If you could just move outside, and you're free to talk as much as you like, we just have some business to finish. Extension request number 155-674, Mark Garage and Parking Area.
This, very briefly, was one that was approved. I think you and I went out there like 3 years ago.
Where is it, Mike?
Mark. Garage.
Their new garage.
Yeah.
So that was, the original order and conditions was issued in May of 2018. It's good for 3 years. They bid the project. They had to rebid the project. So 3 years would have been up May of 2021. With the COVID extension that applies to all land use permits now, that will run out in January 10th the next year. They were before the planning board last night for an extension of that site plan approval. So they asked for an extension until November 30th of 2022. Give them time to bid the project and actually do it. So maybe a date of another year, or to 12/31.
I move that we grant an extension for a year as requested by Mark.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Brian?
Aye.
Couple of quick ones. If you remember, on Damon Road, back in May, we had a rainy site visit. There were 3 lots left, lots 5, 6, and 7, on Jimmy Tappas's land that were unbuilt on. I really need to get here. I love being on this. The original order of conditions has expired, and 5, 6, and 7 still are to be built. New England Engineering, Kent Oldfield sent another request in for the state for another file number. Months go by, they can't find the check. They found the check, they issued a file number. So this is another different file number for just lots 5, 6, and 7 on Damon Road.
Respectfully, their obligation was to complete the retention pond, detention pond on Lot 8 and such. So that was conditional on, our acceptance of 5, 6, and 7 was conditional on them bringing the...
Yes, there was a little settling basin at the bottom of the driveway.
Kent has to sign off on that, and we were gonna do it. It was conditional. That was part of the condition that night.
Okay.
So the signatures, while we can do it, I know that they got to take care of. They got to take care of that shortcoming. It was no big deal at all. It was quite insignificant, but Kent hasn't signed off on it yet.
Okay, I'm in contact with Kent frequently, so I'll get a CE certification that
And
works.
I don't want to do it, but I don't want to be used either.
Okay.
That's it.
So is this,
So there was a vote back, if you remember, on that sidewalk in May
Right.
to approve the order of conditions. This is.
but now we have the, I saw the note from the state that said there were greater than 4 houses in the subdivision where the stormwater standards met. They're asking for additional information. Is that what we're talking about here?
Yes, perhaps we could sign those, Mike, but hold them in abeyance, is that right?
Yeah.
Perhaps we could sign them tonight, and if everyone agrees that an extension is warranted.
One of the items in that email, Tracy, also was that, well, there should be certificates of compliance on
Correct.
the ones that have already, but they have been certificates of compliance for 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Okay.
Okay.
It was just number 8, I believe, that had the glitch, something like that, yeah.
Okay.
But to Mike's point, yeah, if it's signed, we'll hold it until we have certification that that's.
Let's do that, that'll be good for everybody.
All right.
Okay.
My brain is mush, so. I know. Been working since 8 a.m. Okay.
Good for you.
And as long as we're doing previous orders and conditions, there's a few that were voted approved but never passed around to be signed because we were still in remote mode. One was on, the Harvard Street project.
Thank you.
That parking lot across the street from the Fifth Street Diner. That was down to 11 lots. It was knocked down to 11. And he has planning board approval now for that 11th, that townhouse development.
They're all over it today. They're in the street today, and they're going ahead right now, as we speak.
11 lots.
Should get their order conditions recorded.
Huh?
That was good. You did.
Will you be on the road tomorrow night? Take a look if all erosion control measures are in place there, because I didn't see them.
I went in that parking lot a couple of days ago. There wasn't any work taking place. but
Today, they're in 5th Street, Harvard 5th. They're in it, and that lot was full of equipment and
What is this?
activity, full.
If I may. So the contractor that's doing that work, it's called Mountain Shade, and they're working for the developer, who's Matt Olson, I believe.
Yep.
And they're stubbing the utilities off of the roadway onto the private property there, just because our street opening policy is such that no work or excavation is allowed in the right of way after November 15th. So they were trying to get it in at the last minute so that they could get it stubbed off the road. I don't believe they're doing any other work this year beyond stubbing the utilities off the road. Just so you know.
Took them 30 trucks to do it. A lot of activity there.
So I believe when they start the actual development on the site, they'll install the erosion controls and all that.
Sounds like a plan, yeah. That pitch, it doesn't go to the river anyway where they were today.
When you were there, Mike, did you check the slope that Unitil had cleaned up?
I've been by a couple of times. I didn't look today, but I've been by a couple of times. It looks undisturbed. the wattles, are doing their job. They're catching a lot of leaf litter that they put down, so they're terracing it a bit. They're doing their job.
I saw it the other day,
Yeah,
too.
Oh, good.
It looks like it wasn't tracked out, you know, like, they cut a few more trees up top, but they had to, and they would have had to anyway.
Before you put your pens away, this was a good year ago, Clarendon Street on the way into St. Joe's Cemetery.
Yeah.
House
Oh, yeah.
proposed, Hannigan Engineering. They never really called on it, but that never got signed either. Significant.
Nick, I really want to thank you for sticking around tonight and for being here. That was, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
I would like to just
Go ahead, Ralph. Yeah.
briefly mention that thanks to Nick's initiative, the city got another Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Award of $173,350 for the John Fitch Highway project. And I think it's emblematic of the kind of thing that commissioners should be aware of, because it's a terrific explanation of how climate change is affecting us now and in the future. So I'm not going to belabor that, but I will send this out to everyone by email so you can look at it yourself.
Great.
I
So
saw
thank you-
that.
Thank you very much for doing that.
You're welcome, and I didn't want to get up and talk when we were discussing the development up there in the Baker Brook watershed. There were enough angry residents there, so. But one of the things we looked at in the Baker Brook watershed specifically is that if you reduce the impervious cover over the entire watershed by 50% or more, you reduce the flood elevations on John Fitch Highway specifically by a foot or more. So that's one of the things that can be brought up by the commission if, if you're looking to argue against allowing that development to happen on that site there.
Yeah.
Nick, I actually sent that to Tim while he was, I saw it somewhere, and I sent it to Tim. But do we have, have we posted that on the website? Can we put that on our website? I think it might be premature, but,
So I'm supposed to have had it done by now, but I need to create a project website on the city's website.
okay.
And I'll post all these infographics and all that stuff
That's
up
great.
there. And, once I have that link, I can send it to you and Mike and everyone. And
Yeah,
post it wherever you need to.
thank you. Can we have a motion and a second
I
to
move that we
adjourn?
adjourn.
One more, if you will. Sorry. 155 Minneapolis Ave. Nice new house with no impact on the wetland in the rearage. Facing the house to the left, I'm going to guess 165 is now a stump dump.
65 it must be.
I'm guessing facing the house on the left.
Yep.
It ends, I'm guessing it's 165 lot. Whether he owns it or not, don't know, but it's a stump dump against the wetland,
Okay.
and that's a concern.
I think that's, I'm blanking on the young kid's name.
Ian Brennan.
Thank you.
Ian Brennan.
Boy, it's late. I think he owns that lot next door.
Okay.
And I have his number. He has,
Okay, it's a violation,
Didn't Ian
and
come before us like a while back? Is that
and I don't know, I don't know, Mike, do you know if they came from 155? Because if they did, it's a more egregious violation. If he just took them from here and he knew it was a sensitive issue and he just put them over there, if someone else came in and dumped them there is one thing, but if he took them from there and put them over there, that's more egregious.
yeah.
Let's follow up with
Be
him on
in
that.
touch with Ian, because he calls me often enough, because he has other projects going on in the town.
So we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
Second. Delay.
Commissioner Bro? We lost Commissioner Bro. Commissioner Baker?
Aye.
Commissioner Christian? Commissioner Donnelly? Mike, say aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Helene? Aye. So it's unanimous that we are adjourning the regular meeting of the November 10th, 2021 Fitchburg Conservation Commission.
Madam Chairman, that was...